one thing we will all agree on, or we may all agree on, is it's freely given. No one had a say when they were born, and we're carrying on with this life that we have. And another thing is, it's what makes us tick. Without life, we can't do the things we're doing. Without life, even the things we enjoy, whatever it is, we cease to exist. So it's the essence that makes us tick. And like anything that exists, life is given for a reason. And this lockdown season has kind of helped a lot of people reflect what's the purpose of life? What am I doing? Because the monotony of living has kind of been broken down, put to a stop or a slowdown with the pandemic. And we're all now kind of in a phase of reflecting relatively. So in summary, we can look at life. It's freely given. It's a gift. And like anything as well, most things have an expiry date. So while we have life, what are we doing with it? Are we living? What are we using that unique gift for? Because this gift, much as everyone's got it, it's different for each person. So if you have anything and you're not using it for what it's designed for, that means it's being used abnormally. And that's where the word abuse comes from, abnormal use. So look at something like a car. It's nice, it's meant to do certain things, but if it's being used for, say, destructive purposes, that's not what the designer created it for. So it brings to mind certain, I'd say, keywords: purpose, freedom. We've got the freedom to use this life, but are we using it for the purpose it's meant to be? And that purpose is unique. Okay. So for everyone, so life then starts, we have dreams, we have aspirations, we have desires. We're kind of dreaming of doing certain things because we have a destination on this journey of life. And when the journey starts, it actually does start with relationships. When the journey starts, say, in utero, at conception, there's a relationship there between the mother and the child. When the journey starts, say, with a friend, it's a relationship. As we get older, we form different relationships. We're using life. And back to that question, are we living, or how are we living? Are we using it as it's designed to be, or are we abusing it? I find quite fascinating. Many people might know the story of the scorpion and the frog. They found themselves on the journey of life. Both of them then kind of desired the same destination. They were both excited about it. And it looked really glam and, lots of things to be achieved there. It was like, this is the dream. But there was a problem. They had to go through a river. For the frog, that wasn't a problem. For the scorpion, it was. So the scorpion then turned to the frog. Can I have a ride on your back? The frog thought to himself, you sting. That was their desired destination with all their dreams. So the frog thought to himself, but you sting. The scorpion said, I know I sting, but you're doing me a favor. So why should I hurt you? So the frog knew something. The frog knew the truth. And that's another key word I'd like us to hold, the truth. The frog knew the truth, but the scorpion then negotiated with it. You're doing me a favor, I wouldn't hurt you. And helper as the frog is, he thought, of course, that makes sense. So we also need to be mindful. Some things may make sense, but we'll see. So a lot of things in our real world, I believe the real world is the world we don't see. What is essential in life is invisible. Life is invisible. We can't see our breath. We can't see power. We can't see faith. We can't see love. Love is powerful. We can't see kindness. It's exciting, it's rewarding. We can't see appreciation. We can't see lies. We can't see deceit. And the frog did not force, the scorpion did not force the frog. There was no physical force there, but it did something very powerful. It appealed to that unseen realm. It negotiated with it. It went through its thoughts. It manipulated its mind, and the frog gave in. So they started the journey, And because the frog had bought the story, this dream is going to happen for us. It's got to be me. If it's got to be, it's up to me. And it felt like a, how a kind person, a helper, which we all, I mean, quite often we do this and we think, and sometimes we regret it. If I hadn't helped that person, things wouldn't have gone wrong. But does that mean we should not help others? I think that's where I'll highlight that word truth again, holding on to truth. Halfway through the river, the frog got stung out of the blues, total shock, paralyzing. And it was like, why did you do that? The scorpion said, but I'm a scorpion. That was the truth, which unfortunately the frog had discarded. And unfortunately, in this scenario, the frog died. Now, that doesn't always happen in relationship, and sometimes, unfortunately, it does. Okay. So, like I said earlier, it begins in the mind. The shackles that get us into destructive relationships, it's in the mind. It's not the things that's happening on the outside. And the freedom that will set us free, whether it's a relationship between, parents and child, whether it's a relationship between employer and employees, because yes, even with parental relationships, it can happen. It starts with that thought of, I own you. You're my possession. You do what I want. And then you now find that people grow up and they're not fulfilling their purpose because in adulthood, they're still feeling like a child. So they've never been allowed to grow, but nobody could see that because all that manipulation was on the inside. It happens in marital relationships. And that's one thing I'm quite passionate about because on a daily basis, somewhere in this world, one person dies. Purpose is aborted. Children's lives are ruined. And then it affects the children. They grow up to be adults that we think, oh, they're crazy or there's something wrong with them. People are blaming them, but the problem started way back. So the shackles are unseen, freedom is unseen. And sometimes we might find ourselves in this kind of destructive relationship. It could be at work, it could be at home, it could be in any relationship. So it's important to be mindful of it. And at this point, again, I will say, there's a saying that says there is no health without mental health. If you're physically healthy and your mind isn't, it's being manipulated, problems are looming. So that was it for the frog. Sting. It aborted its purpose. And it thought to itself, I knew it. I knew it was going to happen. How many things can we look back on and we thought, I knew this was going to happen? But I also believe that regret is like eating rotten food. So there's no point blaming oneself to say, oh, I should have done things differently. Yes, we can learn the lessons, but putting ourselves down is not going to move us forward into purpose because the focus is fulfilling life's purpose, to be living. We make decisions as best we know. So if we're going to do things differently, something has to change in the mind. Control. The scorpion controlled the frog. But because it didn't twist its arms, because it didn't push it, nobody saw that. Employers control people. You have, controlling employers. Parents control. Spouses control. It happens everywhere. Control. Coercion. Coercive control is when someone in authority or who perceives themselves to be in authority tries to manipulate, threaten. They use manipulation, intimidation, domination to make another person do something against their conviction, like what the scorpion did to the frog. It twisted its thoughts. So you won't see physical abuse there. It's a manipulation of the mind or that dominant behavior or threatening the person. So that person just thinks, for peace sake, I don't want anything to go wrong. At the same time, the poor person is thinking something is not quite right in this relationship. But because there isn't overt abuse, the relationship carries on. And that person is not going on a healthy path to fulfilling purpose. Like I said earlier, it all happens through the thoughts in the mind, in that unseen arena. The frog started doubting itself. And that's part of what happens in coercion. You start doubting reality because the frog knew all along scorpions sting. But it sold that truth because by the time the manipulation and the reasoning is always like justifiable. So the truth has to be firmly entrenched, otherwise there are forces that will shake it. So it's important to always remember there's so much happening in our unseen world than what we're seeing around us. We see it. The scorpion knew all along he was a scorpion. He knew what he was capable of. Lies. Those are all tools that are used against the mind. So the onus lies on the owner of the mind. Mind our minds. And stings. So sometimes we get a sting, we recover because we're still carrying on, because we've still got life in us. We allow ourselves to be stung again. And also it's because we haven't kind of identified the cause of what's going wrong. And that's where help is needed. I will tell the story of Omolola because she's given me permission to share her story. She says, and I'm reading this, she says, it's not to shame anyone. It's not to shame the perpetrators. That's not what she stands for. It's not to blame anyone. And it's not for fame. She's not seeking popularity or anything. She said it's only just if only one person can be set free from abusive relationships and fulfill their potential, then it's worth sharing the story. It's not something she's proud of, but she's happy to use the story. I wondered why I had been stung. Nothing I had done justified this, or so I thought. I was stunned, but worse was the sight before me. His sturdy frame trembling with rage, his back obscuring the light of day as he glared at me back in the window. Then the words came out that gave me light. I do not expect to be challenged, queried, or questioned. She said she thought to herself that day, so this thing, she was able to match it. She had heard about controlling people, but because things were going well in her home, they had good times, and then something would happen. But the one thing she found frustrating was she just couldn't be herself. She had dreams, she had aspirations, but there was that subtle scorpion rationale. And if anytime she tried to resist, then she will be bombarded by, things that would get her excited and happy again. So her voice was quashed. And once one of her friends told her once, she said, "Oh, you found your voice." So she said she thought to herself, so people were aware and she didn't know. And she couldn't blame anyone because the question was, he never beat her. He did nice things. People saw all the nice things. So that was Omolola's story. So if you know anyone, sometimes, people will say, "Oh, but it's obvious." Please don't judge. Please listen. Maintain confidentiality. Help people with their own permission, and let's always keep safety in mind, because when confidentiality has been breached, some people have lost their lives. I mean, it's even that there was a story about someone who actually confided in the policeman, but the abuser was also working in the same place, and that got her into trouble. I mean, she confided in the policeman, not as a policeman, but as a family friend. So let's be careful not to judge people, listen, and maintain confidentiality always, because we could be sending that person down a slippery road. Omolola said she came to that point, was like, who am I? What exactly is my purpose? Am I a doormat? So it was in the process of thinking, who am I? She had to think also to herself, who am I not? Because sometimes we may not even know where we're meant to be going, but we know one thing, we're not meant to be where we are. And that's where a response is needed in terms of moving forward. So back to what we were saying earlier, thoughts, it's important to mind our thoughts, because the thoughts determine our decisions. The decisions determine our actions. Now, we can't help, says you can't stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop it from making a nest. Because thoughts come, we don't know where they, they come from different things. They come from activities, people we engage with, experiences. So it's important to filter those thoughts, take the healthy ones and discard what's not aligning with a healthy purpose. Because those thoughts will determine our decisions and ultimately our actions. And if we look back, where we are today is a result of the decisions we have made, yesterday. And our tomorrows will be determined by our decisions today. So if we're not happy and we feel we're not in line with purpose right now, that means we need to make different decisions. And the question is, what decisions do I need to make today for the future I desire? Who is driving my life? Sometimes we find in the driving seat of our lives, it's been occupied by, it's not someone that we want to be there. Or even if the person, we have decided that the person should take that driving seat, they're going in a different direction. We've agreed we're going somewhere. And it's okay, you drive, so I get a rest. And then you start heading somewhere else. Then that means a conversation needs to happen. It's important to respond and not react, because sometimes when we find ourselves in distressing situations, we can get angry and act emotionally, and quite often that doesn't help. It's making objective decisions. That's what helps, because if you take time to respond rather than react, you can make a plan, you can think clearly, it helps you to know when to hold off and not complicate things. So please, let's remember this as well, to respond and not to react. Okay. Quite like this quote, it says, self-control is strength, right thought is mastery, calmness is power. A lot of times the way we respond to situations is because of the way we've learned in the past. And it could be, yes, some of us emotional, some of us self-control. And if we find ourselves in a situation where we often react emotionally, that means we have to relearn, as it were, retrain our brain. And that's doing more of the self-control thing, learning more to hold back, helps us to get better at it.